Hey all, Matt Scheckman here, aka Shecky the Techie, and we're coming to you with one of Shecky's most important maxims, one of Shecky's laws. We're talking about cables and connectors, and the one that I'm going to repeat again and again and again. And even with me repeating, guess what? I occasionally forget and break it. So don't worry if you do, but it's a good thing to remember. A cable and a connector never dictate the signal. Okay? Not only that, but the connector doesn't necessarily dictate how it's connected through the cable. Boy, that's confusing, and it is. Boy, that can create trouble, and it does. The bigger your rig gets, the more complex your setups get, the more likely you are going to encounter that. So what am I talking about with that? Well, let's start with the ubiquitous instrument jack or quarter-inch jack. Okay? The quarter-inch plug, commonly used as an instrument cable, can come in two variants, two very common variants, TS or TRS. By comparison, if we look here, these are TS quarter inch. Quarter inch is the diameter of the connector. T for tip, S for sleeve. You will note both of those are metallic with a non-conducting metal separating them. In theory, if it is wired correctly, each of those should be connected to a conductor in the cable. So each half of this cable, and this has two cables together, should have two wires in it. One of which is wired to the tip, the other of which is wired to the sleeve. Remember, you always need at least two conductors. A cable with only one conductor can't conduct anything because electricity of any form only works in a circuit. So you need a send and a receive, a hot and a ground, a hot and a neutral, however you want to call it. And you can ground to the shield. You can do all sorts of other things. It's also why a cable that's carrying higher voltages and has one of its internal conductors break can be very dangerous because now it is only one conductor. If that is the hot, if that is the energized one, that electricity wants to make a circuit. And if it's wet and you touch it with salty skin and you give it a path to ground because you're not wearing insulated shoes, you become the new conductor. So always be careful and be aware of that. But for functional use, you need two to send one. Tip, sleeve, one signal. Mono channel. On the other end, this one has what's either called an 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter TRS cable. If you'll note, this one has two parts with a non-insulating separator. This one has three. A tip, T, R for ring, S for sleeve. In this case, if it's wired correctly, that should be three conductors wired to tip, ring, and sleeve. Now wait a sec. If this is two conductors, and this is two conductors, and they're being run into here, isn't that four conductors? How do we only have three coming out? Yes, it is, and yes, we do. Here's why. Why are there two conductors in here? One is the signal, the other is the ground or the return, the place for the signal to go back. One is the signal, one is the ground or return, the place for it to go back. Here, one part is signal 1. One part is signal 2. The third part is the way back for both of them. So the two sleeves are wired together to the one sleeve here, but the tip is the tip of one and the ring is the tip of the other. That's a classic example of how a cable can be wired differently. TS, TRS. We do have TRS quarter-inch cables. This one here is again 3.5 millimeter TRS. Here's quarter-inch TRS. Tip, ring, sleeve. There's also 3.5 millimeter and 2.5 millimeter TRRS. What does it mean? Means multiple rings. Those have 4 connectors on the one little one. Very commonly used with cell phones, because with that, it's a stereo headphone jack and a mic input. So you need that ground or return. You need one for the left ear, one for the right ear, and one for the microphone. TRRS. TRS, TRS, TS. Quarter-inch, eighth-inch. Now, again, that's super important maxim. This right here is TRS to XLR. It should be, if it's wired correctly and as expected, and it's what I bought and know it's supposed to be, that the tip, the ring, and the sleeve are each wired to their own pin on the XLR. This is a great adapter, a very commonly needed adapter, and the most accidentally misused adapter in certain very specific applications. In the assumed use, this is to let you put a balanced XLR signal into a balanced TRS jack. Very commonly, you might have a microphone that outputs a balanced XLR, but you might have an audio interface that even does have some preamp in it perhaps, but doesn't have an XLR in. And so you now need to send the balance signal in on a TRS. Even more likely, you have an output that is a balanced output TRS, so you're going to use this, but you're going into an amplifier that wants an XLR signal. Hopefully there's an adjustment for the incoming signal because it's coming in line, or it knows to expect line on the XLR, otherwise it's going to be way too hot and you're going to need a pad. We cover that in a previous video. But again, balanced to balanced, no problem. Again, we're going to go much deeper into what balanced is. When is this a problem cable? This one, or worse still, I have seen ones that are the TRS minis, 3.5 millimeter TRS to XLR, or someone will go 3.5 meter TRS to quarter-inch TRS female. And what do? They say, oh, I have my laptop. I have my iPod, if you still have one. I have some audio output device with a headphone jack on it. And I'm doing a live event, and I don't have any walk-in music. I don't have any background music. I want to keep people entertained while they're walking in and walking out. I need to hook up my TRS mini stereo jack into my audio console, which has XLR connectors on it. And what do? They take adapter 1, TRS, which we're assuming the female is TRS. I know it is because it's supposed to be. You could still test it. But realize, not guaranteed, it might be a TRS to TS adapter. But in this case, let's assume it's passing all 3 pins on the male to all 3 pins on the female. We now take a TRS quarter-inch male, circuit it together. And now we have our headphone jack to an XLR. 3 conductors, 3 conductors. Yay, we're good. And you hook it up and you barely hear any music. In fact, you're cranking up, doing everything. And at best, the music's horribly distorted, sounds like garbage, and is coming in at ultra low levels. And you're going, one of these cables must be bad. It could be, but not likely in that situation. In that situation, the problem is this likely was meant for a stereo signal, but it doesn't care what the signal is. It's 3 conductors to 3 conductors. This one was not meant for a stereo signal. It was meant for a balanced mono signal. But again, it's 3 conductors to 3 conductors. When we make these together and we plug it into your laptop on one end and into an audio console on the other, now that laptop says I have 3 conductors. I'm using them as the right output, the left output, and the ground or return. So I'm sending 2 discrete channels, left ear and right ear, on this one cable. But when I go into my audio console, it thinks the XLR is one mono signal. Why is that mono signal on 3 pins? Because it thinks it's a balanced signal. Again, we haven't gone in depth in that yet, but understand there's a whole trickery that lets balanced cables have much lower noise and run much longer distances. The way it does that is it has the same signal 180 degrees out of phase with itself. And because of that phase difference, it cancels one signal with the other. That's what it's meant to do. That's how it gives you the best mono signal in a balanced situation. Except this wasn't a balanced situation. I'm sending left ear, right ear to pin 1 and pin 3. And now it's trying to cancel out those 2. So my audio sounds terrible because I created that situation. I didn't think of what the connectors were, what inputs are, or how to do it. That's why, by comparison, that other cable I had before, this one here, is actually meant for taking stereo and breaking it out to dual mono. If I run a stereo out left and right, TRS, but I don't want it going in as balanced TRS, it breaks it out to left and right, and you will note, gives you the hint, because it's labeled tip and ring. So one of these is the tip signal, one is the ring signal, they both share the common sleeve signal, and I go into 2 channels on my audio console or interface, and by doing that, I'm preserving the stereo. I'm taking the one stereo cable and splitting it to 2. This is the way to do it. This is not. However, what if you only have XLRs in? Well, just as you combine this one with this one, which you shouldn't have, you can actually take this to this with a barrel and go to the XLR. Now, that won't be a balanced signal, even though this is set for the 3 and that's set for the 3, and it's looking for balance because this isn't 3. But you won't get the cancellation error, and it will work just fine. So 2 of these with 2 barrels to 2 of these on that will do the job for you. Likewise, by comparison, that's sort of what this one's meant to do all in one. Put these ones down, take the 1 stereo mini, come out to the 2 mono, again, labeled tip and ring, also color-coded black and red for left and right most commonly. Though, tip and ring can also be insert cables, send and receive. Again, cable doesn't dictate signal. Connector doesn't dictate signal. It's why you have to know your gear, know your cables, read the fine manual, RTFM, but that's why it's so critical. But you could take this into these two again into barrels, and use that to convert them to XLR, and you go into 2 channels, and just like that, you now have a left and right mix coming into your board, and you're avoiding cancellation. Here, for instance, is a TRS right angle pancake connector. Very useful on pedal boards or on synths where it's going to be pushed up close to another synth. You go in with this. In theory, the female should be TRS. Do you know for sure it is? You could test it. You could make sure you buy reliable cables that are. But realize there's that possibility that even though this is 3 conductors, this might not be 3 conductors. Okay? The flip side of that would be this one right here. A mini TS to one would presume a 1/4" TS female. No guarantee though. Also realize you can put a TRS cable into a TS connector. What that's going to do is short the ring and sleeve together as if they're one sleeve. That could be harmless, could be fine, could create interference, or could actually damage certain equipment. Again, read the fine manual. The greatest example of the fact that the connector in no way defines what it is would be this little guy right here. One end, TRS, mini 3.5. Instinct, I bet you that's a stereo headphone jack. Not even close. It's a MIDI signal. Now wait a sec, MIDI by spec use 5-pin DIN. This connector, the DIN connector invented in Germany. It's meant to have 5 pins. It has 5 slots on it. If you look at your MIDI device, most of them will have 5 pins. But the MIDI spec has never used 2 of those pins. They were always reserved for future use and have never been used. MIDI only uses 3 connectors. It uses a 5-pin connector to connect it, but it only uses 3 pins, which is why a TRS connector is fine. Problem solved. MIDI jack too big, making smaller and smaller devices. Hey, 3.5 millimeter TRS. Except there wasn't initially a spec on that. And the problem is, how do I wire it up? Because remember, MIDI is a digital signal. I still need a send, a return, and a ground. A send return and a ground. It does not bomb them together. That's how it maintains the signal. Well, which one's wired to which? TRS? Or is it RTS? Or is it STR? Which of these pins? Now remember, MIDI's only using the same 3, but how are we wiring to this? What you wound up with is a hodgepodge, and that is why with these adapters, this one I don't believe is labeled, so that makes it even more fun because you have to guess or know what you bought. A lot of times they do use color coding. Normally the red is one type and the blue is the other, but that's not guaranteed. But it could either be what's called a type A connector or a type B connector. The difference is reversing the tip and ring, how they are wired to the key data pins on the MIDI. Some devices can take both A and B. Some are only A. Some are only B. Even worse, there are multiple devices I own that could take either or on transmission, but only one on receive, or use a different one for transmit and receive. Frustrating as hell, I understand. But that's why we're going to remember Shecky's Law. Mantra number 1, the connector doesn't define the signal. It's why you need things like cable testers or multimeters and documentation, and fine documentation at that, so that when you're lost, you can read that fine documentation and get the answer to why what's suddenly not working might be perfectly fine and might just be a connection issue. That's all for now. Please like, follow, subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications there. We've got a lot more coming. We're going to go more into balance versus unbalance, more into MIDI, All sorts of stuff to cover, and that's just audio before we even get to optics, lighting, any tech you're interested in. Like, follow, and subscribe. Keep up with us.